Hello again. This is Module 7. It is the second module in set number 2. And it continues to deal with themes of the Anthropocene. This particular theme focuses on information. The world is becoming much more information dense and therefore complex. This sounds trivial, but in fact, it is very, very profound. As we go through this, just remember one thing. Among many other functions, you are an information processing unit. Your culture is an information processing unit. That's what culture does, that's what you do. Therefore, if I significantly change the information environment you're working in, I will significantly change you, most likely in ways that neither you nor I fully appreciate. So, some of the trends behind this particular theme. The first is that the amount of information, raw information that we're producing is extraordinary. It's easy to not understand how much additional information we're producing on an accelerating basis. So a couple of years ago, Google CEO Eric Schmidt pointed out that every two days, we produced as much information as humans created from the dawn of civilization to 2003. Think about that. Every 2 days. And that is shrunk since he said that. Now, there's a huge argument about what information means, right? So how many pictures of scowling cats counts as information? How do you think about information? If I have one copy of a book and then I make another copy that's digital, is that 2 copies? Is that twice as much information? We can leave those questions aside for now. The important fact, the one that you must not lose sight of, is that the amount of information that you're exposed to, that flows through you and over you every day, is much more than either your history or our society's history prepared us for, and it's continuing to accelerate. That's one of the keys to understanding the impact of information. Information structures are growing at every level of the system. So for example, think about a city. As you may or may not know, one of the projects that a lot of people are engaged in, even as we speak, is building smart cities. Building cities that know where you are, that can process information, that can identify a traffic accident, that can locate a gunshot based on sensors placed around the city. This system is, as some of you from New York may know, is already being put into place in New York City, so that we're able to identify where gunshots come from. We're building smart infrastructure. We're building smart material that will tell us when it begins to fail, so that rather than have to survey bridges, for example, every year, every 2 years to make sure that the concrete and the steel are still in good condition, the bridge tells us when it is in fact failing. General Electric and other jet engine makers for a long time have created jet engines that call ahead to the next airport if they have a maintenance issue, so that we can have the technology available to fix them and get people rapidly on their way. As we build this kind of information in, we're creating entirely new challenges that we don't think about often. So for example, 15 years ago, if I went out into the mountains around Phoenix, and I was in the superstitions or the matzatzals, you couldn't get a hold of me. If anything happened, I was on my own. There was no way to contact me. There was no way for me to contact anybody. I would have to wait until somebody found me. And if it was coyotes, too bad. Now, of course, we have phone coverage over that entire area. So if you get in trouble, you simply pull out your smartphone and call somebody and say, okay, I'm out on this trail. I broke a leg, come and get me. How does that change the wilderness experience? How does it change the world that you know that every place you go, somebody will be able to contact you or you'll be able to contact somebody? What happens to the idea of wilderness? Or to take another example, we're building a lot of robots. One of the things that we've done recently is we've begun to interconnect the robots to create a robot internet. And as part of that internet, we're building learning capability into the internet. So when something happens to a robot in Japan, the robots in Australia and in the United States and in France will be able to learn from that experience. And the system begins to learn by itself. What does that mean? What do those robots know? What kind of controls are there on the system? Once you build a learning system, that's what it does. It learns. It doesn't have to tell you what it learns. These are some of the challenges of the information age, and there are only a few of them. We'll get into some more of them later. But here's another one to think about. One of the things that we know is that the most important confrontation between potential adversaries at the geopolitical level, between, say, Russia, China, the United States, is not occurring in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's occurring in cyberspace. What I am doing is I am building cyber into virtually everything I make. At the same time, I'm not putting much security in there because most of the people who build these systems are not trained in security. Therefore, what I'm essentially doing is constructing a society that I know will be vulnerable to significant attack. Why do we do that? We do that because this is a new world and we don't really know how to think about it yet. So, written communication. This is an interesting graph for a couple of reasons. The first is it shows you a very, very significant climb in the amount of information transmitted. The second is it shows you the death of one technology and the birth of another. The US mail system, which still exists, is essentially an artifact at this point. Not anachronistic, there's things that need to be sent through the mail, but it's an artifact. Information in social networks has taken off almost directly, not even exponentially. It's grown faster than that. So what this shows you is both a significant increase in information and a change. What does this mean? We don't know. It follows the logistic growth curve, which is a very common curve that you'll see in this and other examples. Population, for example, grows along the logistics. Basically, a logistics growth curve is called an S curve because it looks like an S. And what it does is it starts from a very low point, and then it hits its growth phase, and then it levels off. Or, depending on what happens at this point, it can go down, it can go up, or it can oscillate. We'll see that in a second. But here's some of the things to think about with information. As you hit this S curve and it goes up like this, what does that change? If there is so much information around you that you have to sample to know if it's meaningful or not, what happens when you can no longer sample all of the information around you? How do you simplify your life?